visual impact is important. It's for me, it's always been about a visual thing. That is the primary, for me, the primary access into whatever else can happen conceptually. More and more I try to just get back to art making, really very basic art making without the encumbrance or the expectation of significance. I want the things to stimulate my mind and hopefully others really at first glance, at the first visual impact of it. And whatever power it might have after that, let that unfold gradually. More and more I find myself visually attracted or enticed to keep looking at the works, and for me that's a good thing, because the mental processes happen while you're looking at it also, and the more time, the more compelling the visual object is, I think, the more other processes can happen in the background, in the back of one's mind. There are two installation-based works. One is a large constellation of fluorescent lights with wings carved from polystyrene. The polystyrene is also a very spontaneous and loose process. It's slightly difficult to control, and the process is designed to allow for a very quick manifestation of form. Something that is almost like an idea that gets a physical form in a very short space of time, which is something that's normally not really possible in sculpture, so this is an exploration of that. The other large work is almost the opposite. It's very intricate, very fine, detailed woodwork that accesses kinds of furniture traditions, woodworking traditions, but with an object which the function is completely abstract and metaphysical. Portrait busts serve different functions. It really depends on the kind of form that it takes and the material that it's made of. In general, it relates to humanness, being human, and everything that it entails. There's a long tradition of portraiture. It has a specific reason for its origin. I use it for a reason that has nothing to do with that original. These are not direct portraits of specific people. They are completely from memory, they're completely arbitrary. The kind of form that the face takes is a direct result of the process. If a certain line appears and it looks good, then I go with that. And so, firstly, it's the opposite of portraiture. Yet, I think in the process, and especially by doing it over a number of years, they start to gain a character of their own. They start to become a certain kind of species, maybe. Because of similarities in the way that they're made, similarities in the kind of form that my hand tends to give it, I'm not sure. Or something that's pleasing for me, to my eye. Beauty is a difficult concept because it sits so closely to ugliness. Pleasure and pain are very closely related. And so sometimes I use beautiful form, really like in the common or average understanding of it. For instance, in portrait busts of girls for a specific purpose, sometimes I really work small parts of it to become very delicate, very sensitive. at the same time, some of these portraits that are really rough in places, some chainsaw marks would accidentally or partially accidentally describe a fantastically beautiful arch of an eyebrow, for instance. It's an extremely rough texture, rough mark. You could see it's a violent tool, but it has a similar kind of beauty. The portrait busts in paper in this exhibition, their lower jaws are mangled, their mouths are mangled, partially destroyed. The busts these paper busts they're quite imposing. They have an amazing presence because of the association to regal portraiture. And in that way they are beautiful. There are details of musculature or veins or facial features that I think can be seen as beautiful. The mangled face is the opposite of it. But somehow that's also beautiful. It's abject and it's broken, but for me definitely there's a beauty to that also. I think it's interesting that the material can contain something other than just being a substance. It really adds to the conceptual reading of it. When a bust is carved from encyclopaedia, it has the association of knowledge directly. It contains an unbelievable amount of knowledge. This knowledge has been made almost obsolete by new technologies. The encyclopedias are being discarded and sold as decoration. Yet a lot of it is still valid, absolutely valid. And for the paper bust to contain all of this information within the form, some of it is destroyed by carving it away, but everything inside is still accessible. Theoretically, if you take it apart, the book still exists. There's no glue, there's nothing in the process destroys the actual text. I wanted to use the entire set of those encyclopedias to create this one sculpture, so that it really contains the entirety of that set. It makes it a little bit tricky because if you make a mistake, then you have to work with it. You have to keep going and find a way to make it work. It's a finite supply. It starts by tracing the profiles, the sections, as if you would slice through a body and it would have a certain profile, tracing those on the books as closely as one could guess or estimate, and then to cut them on a bandsaw, drill holes through the books with a high pressure device, and then thread it onto threaded rods, occasionally bolting it together to keep pressure on the paper. If the paper is not pressured, it's very difficult to manipulate and carve, so it flares up. And then angle grinders with really rough sandpaper is just about the only thing that can do anything to the paper. You can use knives, and that's unbelievably cumbersome and very dangerous. Chainsaws do nothing to it at all, so very little other tools have any impact. It needs to be sanded away, basically. The finer details are done with tungsten burrs, rotary burrs, that allow you to go into the surface to do details. Occasionally it's necessary to put stainless steel plates inside the books to reinforce them or to get sufficient pressure to faraway points, or in this case to join the skull next to the head. Books alone wouldn't be able to support it, so it needs reinforcing. for the paper, if I use accidental kind of marks or cut in certain ways, sometimes little bits of text show. It's not just the grey surface of the ink, it's little words appear. And because a certain kind of book is used, these few words that you can see snippets of, little pieces of, in your mind start creating a kind of an overall picture, and they inform the reading of the work as well. So for instance, if you would carve a bust out of Bibles, you'd see all various kinds of words, sometimes mundane words, sometimes words that are specifically associated with a religious text, for instance. And by catching all of these little things along with the physical form, it creates a cloud of associations, a cloud of meaning around the object that you wouldn't get otherwise. All materials have associations, and those associations, especially in relation to art history, it carries meaning. Wooden sculptures have a long tradition, dating back, I don't know, longer than we know probably. All kinds of sculpture specific, all kinds of visual manifestations, human visual products have a tradition. It's impossible to make something out of wood without it having at least some relationship, even in opposition to the tradition. The wood that I use in the carved wood portraits is very inexpensive, industrially produced, chemically treated wood used for outdoor structures and various construction works. It's not very hard, but it's very durable because of the treatment. It resists rot and fungus and decay. And it is completely the opposite of noble or elite. It's very much a functional, basic thing. I laminate blocks, I carve it with chainsaws and other carving tools that are violent and almost overpowered, things that in many cases do not allow me to too much control. The kind of rough spontaneity of some of these marks really takes me to a different place where my mind can complete the details. It doesn't have to be explicit. I use the wood mostly when it's still wet. It's a little bit harder to work that way, but what it does is the fiber of the wood starts showing. It fluffs up, and it's almost as if the tools tear away at something. But it gives a kind of velvety hairiness to the wood, which almost feels a little bit like dry flesh, like not to become macabre, but it becomes extremely organic. Wood obviously is organic, but it becomes more human. You can relate more to the wood as something that you might be, something that might be part of you also. The dry parts, if I rework it later on, or if some pieces are dry, they get a very, very much a bone-like texture, quite hard, quite smooth, a little bit porous. So for me, they're quite fleshy. I dab white paint on them. The white paint sometimes obscure features. Sometimes they become like items of clothing that define the face or that frame the face in a certain way, or maybe hint at a certain kind of context. Like a little girl with a white collar has a specific kind of context, and so the white paint accesses that. Sometimes it looks like I don't know, maybe like injuries, or sometimes it turns them slightly into abject creatures where they have like something splashed on the face almost in a ridiculous way. Some kind of accident. I leave a lot of the execution of that is left to chance. Sometimes I just pour paint, sometimes I paint it without looking at the object. Really, it's to try and entice accidents, and to see what they become, to see what happens. It's really not important in the end where the bits are. At the same time, sometimes there's one drop out of place, and so you have to chisel it away again. So. But that's, for me, it's a process of really getting back to very basic visual principles about balance and form and line and texture, and trying to get away from meaning, because meaning exists and it is valuable, and it certainly has a prime place in art making. But meaning is also a trap, and it's also something that can become take a place of prominence that it shouldn't have. What I mean is that for me, meaning in the artwork became the primary motivation. At the same time, I felt I didn't really have anything specific to communicate, so it felt dishonest. I don't have a soapbox, I don't have a kind of a cause or some real world communication, something that's serious and important, and I don't. So really it's, for me, a relief and a fresh space to be in, to allow chance meaning to occur, that the meaning comes from the object despite me, or despite my intentions, or as a result of a process or a state of mind while making it, or that it occurs more freely, that the object, that the object creates its own meaning, independent of my imposition of some kind of significance. The origin of the styrofoam or polystyrene sculptures is really from a desire to be able to create spontaneous form. That's where it started. The whiteness, the pure, bright whiteness of it definitely has the marble reference, and it accesses the whole tradition of religious and victorious marble carving, angels, wings. In previous solipsis installations, they were very much more sculptural, monumental, and sometimes figurative. It was an instinct to try and follow. What I wasn't expecting was how the specific processes that I settled on using, carving them, creates a very strange, almost abstract surface around the object. In this case, the wings are quite recognizable as wings. In other installations, they were just almost like brushstrokes, really just a form in space. It's almost as if they describe something else, not the object itself, but the air around the object, or the magnetic or energetic field around an object. It's as if the styrofoam form shows another aspect of the object that it relates to. And for me that was very interesting to discover and to explore. It is really fragile. It is not meant to be preserved, which is ironic because the polystyrene, even though it is fragile, has a half-life of nearly 1,000 years. It will outlast all of us by far, given proper care. The problem is that proper care for a work like this involves treating it with a kind of preciousness and a kind of considerateness that is the opposite of the process of making it, of manifesting it. And so, for me, it's a very difficult decision. I prefer to have them destroyed after each installation. The usable parts get recycled and the rest goes to recycling plants, so it gets destroyed. And for me, that's consistent with the spontaneous manifestation of it. It's in almost all instances they were created in the space where they were exhibited. So it's something that emerges, manifests in a certain place, and then disappears again from that place. The freedom and the possibility of fast construction in the styrofoam works allows one to indulge in creating environments that would practically be very difficult to recreate, firstly, and secondly, because of the processes involved, typically it would give one too much time to consider choices, to consider details. If a piece breaks, I want to be able to use that new fracture as a starting block for something new, immediately, spontaneously, and it really leads one away from preconceived intentions and towards something that's more unexpected. For me personally, that was great because there's a kind of boredom to knowing what something will look like before you've even started, and I really enjoy the process of being surprised myself by the outcome. The counter for the polystyrene, because of its lightness and because of its spontaneity and the ethereal nature of it, it felt like it's necessary to have the counter, the opposite of it. So the decision was made to cast some of these polystyrene forms in bronze. The bronze is patinaed pitch black, a really solid dark black, which allows very little light reflection. It becomes almost a silhouette in most instances. Where one is light and airy, the other one is void, but also really heavy. Each of the bronze casts are completely unique, so it negates the possibility of bronze being a multiple, a means to create more and more copies.
Additions.
Yes, for me this is in recognition of the spontaneity of creating the original polystyrene. The ethereal nature of the polystyrene is kind of preserved and solidified in the bronze, but not reproduced. In the process it becomes the companion opposite, the polar opposite of the polystyrene works. Almost the counterbalance, the thing that the one needs the other one to exist. It feels like to me. I really enjoy painting. I wish I could find more opportunity to do it. Like with the sculpture, a certain kind of execution, a certain kind of medium is used for a certain idea. So certain things have to be ink drawings. Some of them have to find their form or they're more suited or more comfortable being pen drawings. Other things really want to be three-dimensional forms. They want to be rough carved, or they need the extra information contained in paper, or the reference to marble sculpture. Or certain images really are better suited to be prints, graphic prints. And so clouds need to be an oil painting. It conjures the whole tradition of oil painting, which is something that I'm nervous to access because I don't have the painting skills to really play with it. But it was during the process of making the works on the show when overall links between all the works started becoming clear. I was driving and I looked up and I saw these clouds and they were really, really beautiful. And in my mind they felt as if they really fit so perfectly with the rest of the works. Yes, there's contrast, yes, the sculptures are violent and expressive sometimes, and the pen. But I don't know. The sculptures are rough and they contain skulls, and it's somewhat disturbing. But for me, they're really tender, and the impact that they have on me is one of a sympathetic tenderness, kind of a protectiveness that it inspires in me. It's a calm and it's a soft and a gentle moment, even though it contains visually the opposite material. The association of wings and skulls and all of that with clouds and heavens, that's a very clear other link. But really it was more of the moment in my daily life, in my physical life, that I jumped over and made a connection to the works I was busy doing. I was hesitant. Painting clouds are really difficult, and many people have done it far, far better than I may ever be able to, but I really, it became almost for me the most important thing on the show. It's as if it absolutely needs that tiny little painting for the rest to fall into place. It's as if it's the one crux around which everything else revolves. That's also hopefully the first of a series of them. I want to definitely explore the impact of what these paintings can be, specifically in relation to the large black sculptures. So we'll see, yeah.
But it's a bit funny that you didn't use a classical canvas.
Yeah, canvas would have been the obvious choice, except for something like this it needed to be tiny and unassuming, and board is very much has that feeling of being pragmatic and in the moment. It's not an artistic endeavor, it was like a human feeling, an impulse to create an image rather than an impulse to make art. Or not even create an image, to capture a moment, something very fleeting.
No, it's beautiful. I actually